Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Poor Richard's Cafe and Star Local Media. Poor Richard's Cafe, Plano's oldest restaurant since 1973. They are open daily from 5:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., serving the three most important meals of the day: breakfast, lunch, and dessert. It is true Texas home-style cooking made with love and grit. That is Poor Richard's Cafe, located off of Avenue K in Plano. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, the sports editor at Star Local Media, and I am being joined by Justin Thomas and Devin Hassan. Gentlemen, we are 3 rounds down in the high school soccer playoffs. We have regionals coming up later this week. By my count, we have 8 total teams left standing between 6A and 5A. So, yeah, let's take stock in the teams that we still have left, plus I guess a couple teams that we have bid adieu to over the past week. So, yeah, let's, I don't know, Devin, we got a few teams that are still kicking over in Region 2 6A, including your Sachse Mustangs, man. Sachse boys soccer making the trip south to Austin for the Region 2 6A tournament after a thrilling shootout victory over McKinney. So just kind of size up just where the Mustangs are at heading into a pretty pivotal week for the program.
I don't think this is a surprise. Mm-hmm. I mean, this was a team that finished second in what turned out to be a very solid 10 6A. Yeah. I think I mentioned leading into the playoffs, they had 18 matches this year that were decided by 2 goals or less during the regular season. Wow. 15 by 1 score or that went to a shootout. So they're used to close games, and they have gotten nothing but close games in the playoffs. Going back to that opener against McKinney Boyd, it's a 2-2 game late in the second half when Jake Duvall's able to net the game winner, so they win 3-2 there. They move on to the area round against Longview, where they go 100 minutes scoreless into penalty kicks. Sachse's able to go. They go for 4 for 4 in their penalty kicks. Miguel Gonzalez, their outstanding goalkeeper, makes a pair of big saves, which leads us to last Friday, a similar story against McKinney. They're down 2-1 late in the second half. Luke Braswell this time gets the tying goal off a set piece, which I bring up because all 3 of their goals against McKinney Boyd were on set pieces, and obviously off the corner to tie it there in the second half against McKinney. So they once again go to a shootout, and after going 4 for 4 against Longview, they go 5 for 5 against McKinney. Isaac Holkowitz netting the game winner. Miguel Gonzalez with another big save to lift them to the win. So, Sachse onto the regional tournament for the second time in 3 years. A lot of these guys, it's a new experience. They were on that team, a handful of them, but they weren't key pivotal guys. But all this close game experience has paid dividends. I think those shootouts and those close matches during the regular season is really, that experience has really paid off, and they've done it with the backbone of this team is defense. And I mentioned Miguel Gonzalez. He had 14 shutouts during the regular season, another against Longview in the playoffs, and they were giving up a little over a half a goal per game. That's even counting the 6-5 game against Rowlett in the season finale, in which the team just kind of let loose because there was nothing on the line. So it's an outstanding unit. It gives them a chance to win every game, and if their offense is able to make enough plays, as you've seen during this playoff run, they're capable of beating anybody.
Plus, I mean, you can't underestimate just the level of comfort that, being able to thrive in those shootouts the way that they have. I mean, as wonky as shootouts can be, as we certainly talked about last week, just to have that kind of consistency there. I mean, it's a situation that surely they're not going to balk at the pressure of that moment, it feels like.
No, and again, one of their shootout wins during the regular season was against Rowlett, who was the 10-6A champion. And so these guys are used to it, and with each week, talking with Coach Brule, their confidence has grown. This is a group that had to replace a lot of seniors from last year, so a lot of these guys were taking on new roles or expanded roles. They grew up during the course of the year, and they're peaking at the right time.
Sachse will continue its playoff run Friday, 4 o'clock down at Kelly Reeves Athletic Complex in Austin against Aldine. They will be joined that day by both the Allen boys and girls soccer teams. Allen boys and girls bound for the regional semifinals in the same year for the first time since 2008, and they've both conducted business in fairly similar fashion through these first 3 rounds of the playoffs. The boys, all 3 of their wins have been by 2 goals. 2-0 against Garland, 2-0 against North Mesquite, and then 3-1 in the regional quarters against Mesquite. You got guys like Reed Berry, who is the engine of their offense. As a head coach Kim Fullerton will say, as he goes, they go most nights, and he's certainly come through big with 3 goals this postseason. Benny Luby and Colton Griffin, 2 other players that have really helped kind of commandeer this offense. They did surrender their first goal of the playoffs in the second half against Mesquite last week. But I mean, with the way that we've talked extensively about just the job that their defense has done this season. I mean, it feels like at this point, if Allen can get out to a 2-0 lead, it's basically death for an opponent. It feels like, just because of how solid that back line has been. And they were able to really they kind of just cracked Mesquite across the mouth in that regional quarterfinal. It sounds like they led 3-0 through one half. And I mean, given Allen's the way Allen has conducted its business this season, I mean, that's more than enough cushion for for that defense to handle. They do draw College Park coming up in the regional semifinals. A College Park team it was a little tough to kind of figure out what to make of them. They kind of squeaked out their first 2 playoff matches 1-0 each of the first and second rounds, and then they just caught fire in the regional quarters against Pflugerville-Hendrickson. They beat them 4-1.
Well, and that's a curious region, the way it's set up. You don't have your kind of traditional heavyweights. Yeah. I mean, Allen and Sachse have had some success, but they're not the first programs that spring to mind when you think of these soccer powerhouses. And College Park, I believe, was the runner-up in their district, and Aldine was the 4th place team.
And they beat the Woodlands.
Yes. So it's really kind of shaping up to be one of those kind of open. I mean, Allen might be, as the only district champion, might be the favorite going into that region.
Yeah, Allen. you have College Park in the midst of their deepest playoff run ever. Allen with its deepest run since 2008, as I mentioned. So, but yeah, I don't know. With the confidence that this Allen team is playing with, I mean, they've got as good a shot as anybody at coming out on top this week. That game is 6 o'clock at Kelly Reeves Athletic Complex. The girls play earlier in the afternoon at 1 o'clock, and this is a heavyweight battle. Them against Vandegrift, who is Vandegrift ranked, I believe, at number 3 in the state, per Top Drawer Soccer. I want to say they're number 8, and according to TGCA, only lost 1 game all season, and that was their first game of the year to a California school. So they're undefeated against Texas. They come in just absolutely rolling, and a matchup that I was looking over just some of their numbers. They've posted 19 shutouts this season, 17 for Allen. I mean, it is a matchup that is certainly a bit of a high qualified regional semifinal. But I mean, listen, watching this Allen team, finally getting to see them in person last Friday against Tyler Lee, they're rolling right now. The offense had kind of gone into a bit of a funk over the back half of district play. It could have something to do with seeing these teams a second time through, and them having a better idea of how to game plan for you, because the offense has just snapped back into form during the playoffs. 5-1 against Naaman Forest, 5-0 against Belton, and then 5-0 last week against Tyler Lee, a Tyler Lee team that was ranked number 10, I believe, in the state by TGCA.
Well, and I was going to ask you about their defense, because I believe it's Carly Wyatt for Tyler Lee, who signed with Alabama, who had more than 40 goals. She was one of the more impressive offensive players I saw this season, and apparently Allen just put the clamps on her, and Maddie Bice for that matter.
Yeah,
Maddie Bice is
I couldn't have told you, just because of the number of just really truly relevant moments that Lee's offense had as far as mounting a serious charge. I mean, they got a couple shots off, within the first 10, 15, 20 minutes or so, but after that, I mean, there was nothing. I don't believe they had a shot on goal in the entire second half. And Allen, those playoff matches, they've all followed the same manuscript. They've held a 1-0 lead at halftime in all 3 of them, and then they've scored 4 goals in the second half in each. I mean, just something about, it's Kelly Thompson joking that it's the halftime speeches, and but nevertheless, it really does become contagious with this Allen team once they, because getting to see it firsthand, it's not like they weren't able to generate, good looks in the first half, just weren't finishing, and just everything seemed to kind of fall into place. It really is such a well-organized and really skilled team as far as the job that they do, moving the ball around and just generating, clean opportunities in the box. And I mean, as has been the case all season, they're getting contributions all across the lineup. You had 5 goals against Tyler Lee. All 5 came from a different player. You had Anna Reza, Ashley Williams, Haley Spray, Madison Williams, and Andrea Ridgely all scoring. And they're in such a good way right now. And I mean, obviously on paper, this Vandegrift team is certainly nothing to snuff at. And yeah, I'd say their biggest challenge since they played Southlake Carroll in non-district. But yeah, I mean, on paper, it looks like a coin flip, and should be a fantastic match. If there is a little bit of an intangible that would favor Vandegrift, it's basically going to be a home game for them, because Kelly Reeves Athletic Complex is 20 minutes away from Vandegrift High School versus being 3 hours and 15 minutes away from Allen. So we'll see if that's a factor on Friday. That game once again is at 1 p.m. down in Austin. Allen versus Vandegrift, two of the absolute best teams still standing in the playoffs. Should be a good one. I just mentioned Southlake Carroll, Justin.
Oh, hey, what's up?
Yeah, buddy. Let's we can switch to talk a little about some Region 1 6A action. You got to see Southlake Carroll, and obviously a matchup that was certainly on your radar for pretty much ever since the playoff brackets were came into focus. So things didn't exactly work out in favor of Coppell, but just getting to see that matchup, one of the more high-profile playoff matches to date. Just what were your takeaways from that one?
Well, definitely didn't disappoint. We were just watching it. You could see the skill on the field, the excitement. It was a high-paced game, back and forth. Carroll just has a dynamic offense with multiple, some of the best offensive talents in the whole state on that team. So it was a very exciting game. Coming out, all the hype. The two top teams in the region. Two of the top 5 in the nation. If you look at that Top Drawer Soccer site.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, each team got a rush like within the first minute, and their fans were on their feet, and that kind of intensity just continued the whole way. Coppell just kind of lost the mark of a Carroll girl early. She took advantage. Maddie Drinowitz, she got the goal. So they were kind of battling. Lots of chances, lots of excitement both ways, and then Coppell finally gets on the board. 10 minutes left, they're down 1-0. Haley Roberson with an awesome header from the left side of the box right into the right corner of the net up high. There was really nothing the keeper could do. So we go to extra time, and something happened, something clicked with Southlake. They give up the goal with 10 minutes left, and they get right into overtime, and boom, 1 minute in, score. 2 minutes later, score again. They're up 3-1, so they just kind of held that lead the rest of the way, but definitely didn't seem like a third round match. A good team is sitting at home right now. That's one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the state, without a doubt, I would say.
But you're not empty-handed right now. You've still got a team that's still kicking. I wonder, just how many years straight between Louisville ISD and Coppell you've had a team in the regional tournament?
Oh,
feels like a pretty
every year. I mean, it's
all the time.
It's been almost every year that somebody's made it to state, let alone just a regionals.
Yeah, that's nuts. You've got the Flower Mound boys are still doing their thing.
Flower Mound boys are still kicking. They will draw. Let's see. Bowie, and it's going to be 4 o'clock out at McKinney's new stadium. So, just looking at the regional draw, you have to say it kind of sets up pretty well for Flower Mound. If you look at the regional rankings, on one side you have Arlington Sam Houston. They're the top-ranked team in the nation. They're going to play Grand Prairie, who's ranked 7th. Then you have Flower Mound ranked 4th, and they actually draw a Bowie team that's not ranked at all. So I guess just looking at the rankings, you would say at least the semifinal draw sets up pretty favorably for them. This is a team that coming into the year, I think everybody had pretty high expectations for. Yeah. They were ranked top 10 in the nation. Basically on their defense, they have a great goalie in Landon Leach. Keepers, Wyatt Brennan, Reese Mullins, their defenders are playing well. They have 2 shutouts in the playoffs. So everybody kind of thought this would be a good defensive team, but man, they've been lighting it up in the playoffs offensively. They have 11 goals in their 3 games. Wow. They won 4-0 the first round over Byron Nelson. Then they get a Brock Clayton goal with I think 7 seconds left to beat Duncanville 4-3. And then they came out and just worked WT White 3-0 on Friday, a game that one of our associates, Kevin, was covering. So
and WT White, a quality program.
Yeah, definitely. Had just beat that Coppell team, or excuse me, I get them all mixed up. get those double headers mixed up. But yeah, very impressive 3-0 showing. Shane Popaluk comes out, scores 12 minutes in. Hector Torres gets one 15 minutes later, so they had a nice 2-0 lead at halftime. Parker George finds the net for the final 3-0 margin. Brock Clayton, another one of their strong offensive players, had a couple assists, it looks like. So really sound performance by Flower Mound. They look to be rolling pretty well, 2 convincing wins and a win over a good Duncanville team.
And what a nice coup, not having to drive all the way out to Midland for both you and for Flower Mound.
It's always up in the air because so many times it's 4 teams from this region and they end up just switching it back, and you're just rooting for the one El Paso team to not root for everybody, and then one El Paso team will win, so all 7 other Metroplex teams have to go out there. But this year, nice right there in McKinney.
Yeah, McKinney ISD Stadium should be a doozy. Yeah, that match is, let's see, Flower Mound versus Bowie is 4 p.m. Friday out at McKinney ISD Stadium.
Yeah, it looks like they have the boys games first and then the girls games after that.
And yeah, that is a look at the very least kind of where things stand right now, at least in the 6A portion of the high school soccer playoffs in our coverage area. Still got plenty of action though on the 5A side of things. Some Frisco ISD programs are always still hanging around, and that's the case plus Lake Dallas, and we will bring on Taylor Ragland and Brian Murphy in a moment to discuss that. But first, got to shine that student athlete spotlight, and for that we mentioned Sachse. Sachse bound for the regional semifinals. One of the key reasons why is the play of their goalkeeper, Miguel Gonzalez. Devin had a chance to go chat with Miguel on Sachse's playoff run, and we will see what he had to say after a word from the sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast.
Hey y'all, this is Devin Hassan with the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. We are at Sachse High School, where the Mustangs are getting ready for this week's Region 2 tournament, which begins on Friday afternoon. Sachse will be taking on Aldine at 4 o'clock at Kelly Reeves Athletic Complex in Austin in the regional semifinals. And I'm joined by Miguel Gonzalez, Sachse's outstanding senior goalkeeper. Miguel, appreciate you taking a couple minutes to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. I think when people kind of look at that bracket, some people might be surprised by Sachse being there. You guys, though, I got to believe that this has been a realistic goal for you and your team all year long.
Yes, personally, we set our own goals this year, starting off small, trying to take over district. That was our main goal to begin with. You know, it didn't go the way we wanted it, so we put our mind to a different goal, which was get second seed, you know, and advance from there and take it step by step, playing game by game. And luckily, we're in where we stand right now, and thanks to God and everything went right.
Well, and you know, defense has really been the backbone of this team all year long, giving up under a goal a game. What's kind of the dynamic back there between you and your defensive unit? Are you vocal out there? Are you directing traffic, or do you kind of guys just kind of know where to go? How's that dynamic back there?
We're very vocal in the back. It all starts in the back, you know, from my defender, my center backs, my wings, with Ricky, Addison, Luke, and Danny in the back. It starts from the back. We're very vocal, and that's what made this team very successful along the way. Because in the beginning, we were struggling offensively, putting in goals because we had the chances, we were creating and everything. It was just we were missing that one touch. And that's what's cost us some of the games throughout the district. And when playoffs started,
everything started to click.
Everything started to click.
Now, Coach Brule, when I talked to him the other day too, talked about the team's camaraderie, not just on the field but off the field. Is this a tight knit group?
Yeah, it's tight. It's like we have our little discussions every now and then, but we're very united in and outside of the field locker. We're very
okay. You know, and I mentioned it might be a surprise to some. It shouldn't be, since Sachse was just there 2 years ago. I know some of the guys were on the team then, some of them weren't. Made it to the regional final where they lost to Jesuit in the championship game. Is that an experience that y'all talk about?
Yeah, we bring it every once in a while, you know, whenever we're like in big games in certain positions. And it was an experience for some of us that were there, and they're like more experienced and know how to give advice to the younger ones that weren't there, and that helps us throughout the way.
Yeah, and speaking of experience, during the course of the season, y'all had a lot of close matches, a handful that went to shootouts.
Yeah.
How big was that getting, because you know that you're going to have those type of matches in the playoffs, how big was having that experience during the regular season and getting into the playoff run?
What really helped us the most for now, from what I've seen, was the shootouts, going into PKs. We had, 3 out of our 4 losses we had in PKs. That really helped us out a lot going into playoffs, because most of the teams usually go into ties, and that's it. That's about it. No PKs or overtime. Well, so that really helped us out.
Well, and obviously you've had to draw on that experience in the last week. You go into the PKs, it gets Longview in the area around. You come up with 2 big saves. Same thing with McKinney on Friday. You come up with a big save there. I mean, there's so much pressure on everybody in a shootout, but especially on the goalkeeper. What kind of mindset do you have to take into a shootout to be successful?
I wouldn't say it's more of a mindset. It's more like usually whenever it's like goes into PKs, it's mostly about luck. You have to have luck. If you don't have that luck on your side, then it's really tough. It's really tough to come out with a big win or save. And luckily, the luck's been on our side of these past 2 games.
So is that something? So I've heard some keepers say, I guess a direction. I've heard some say I just try to read, make a split-second decision.
Yeah, it's mostly, it depends. Every goalkeeper has their own mentality, and for me, I try to do it, like switch it up every once in a while. Sometimes I try to react. Sometimes I try to guess. Or
there's no right way to do it, I suppose. Yeah. Well, I know obviously you're going down there for the first one on Friday, but your goal is to get down there and win 2. I guess in your mind, what are the keys to success for, I guess, this time next week y'all are preparing to go to Georgetown?
Well, it's mostly about staying humble, focused, and just play like we've been playing. And that's about it, and wish for the best.
Okay, fantastic. Again, that's Sachse is going to be taking on Aldine in the regional semifinals, 4 o'clock at the Kelly Reeves Athletic Complex in Austin. That's about a wrap from here. Miguel Gonzalez, appreciate you joining us for a couple minutes. Best of luck this week. This is Devin Hassan, and now back to the podcast.
Thanks again to Miguel Gonzalez for taking the time to chat with Devin for our Student Athlete Spotlight. And with that, we've done a line change. Got Taylor Ragland, Brian Murphy in to discuss the 5A portion of the high school soccer playoffs. Taking a look at a few of the teams that we still have standing that are bound for regionals later this week. And Brian, what a surprise. You got like 3 Frisco schools that are still playing. Just another year in Frisco ISD soccer.
And I thought it was going to be 4. I thought I was going to do the quadruple header on Friday at Standridge.
You've got a busy day coming up Friday out at Standridge Stadium.
Sure.
You have on the boys' side Frisco Heritage and reigning champ Frisco Wakeland, and then on the girls' side Frisco Independence. So a couple newbies to the regional semifinal mix. Let's talk about some of the new blood first. Independence or Heritage. Just start with either. Just talk about their respective playoff runs up to this point.
Frisco Heritage last season was 3-11.
Wow.
In district. They won 3 games in district. This year they flip it around. They tie Wakeland in the season finale. They were going to make a playoff spot regardless. But they're down 2-0 to Wakeland, and they rally back. They score a goal late, and then they score another goal in like the final minute. And I was at that game. And it was almost like they were celebrating like they won. And Wakeland, that result gave Wakeland a district title. And so, Wakeland should have been the one really celebrating, but, when you're the back-to-back defending state champions, it's just like, okay, whatever. And then Heritage, they were ecstatic, man. They were ecstatic. They took Wakeland the distance, and I think that's really, propelled them in the playoffs these first, 3 rounds, and they're coming off a thriller against Lovejoy in, extra time. They scored with 4 minutes left in the second extra time. Wow. To win the game. That's about as exciting as it gets, when it comes to, extra time soccer. Crazy turnaround. I mean, to go from 3 wins to now in the regional tournament, and that's just the epitome of Frisco soccer. Like that, this shows you how tough that district is. Maybe that that 3-11 record last year wasn't because they were that bad. It was just because that district was that good. They just kind of tweak some things, and just like that, just showing the depth of Frisco ISD. 2 Frisco boys teams in the regional tournament.
It sounds like that result against Wakeland was probably more validating than anything, because that's the measuring stick in Frisco ISD soccer. It has been for years, is Wakeland. So to get a result like that against the Wolverines at that juncture in the season, when Wakeland still had something to play for, obviously, and to carry that result now into the playoffs, I think it just kind of validated that we do feel like we belong amongst the elite in this region. And you're seeing what it's blossomed into. They draw Mount Pleasant. That game is 3 o'clock again at Standridge Stadium out in Carrollton, so not a far drive at all for Frisco Heritage. On the girls' side, you have Frisco Independence, a team that was, Lady Knights bound for the 4th round for the first time in school history, I'm guessing.
Yeah, to the regional tournament. Yeah.
Let's see. They also draw Mount Pleasant. That game is at 12:30 p.m. out at Standridge. So just kind of size up Independence and where they're at right now.
So prior to their last game against Creekview, in which they needed shootouts to beat them in a 2-2 game, which I was expecting, them to win by 5 or 6 goals, just based off of, not out of arrogance or anything, or bias to the teams that I cover, they had been destroying teams leading into the playoffs. Their last 2 district games, they beat Frisco. Granted, Frisco finished last place in the district. They beat them 8-0. Okay. Sure, best team in the district, worst team in the district on paper makes sense. But then to finish district, they beat Centennial, who made the playoffs, won their first playoff game against Wiley East. They beat them 7-1. And Landry Corbett would just started going off. 6 goals in that game. They kind of let her loose. There, I think they didn't want teams to have film on her during the year, but then once the end of the season was coming, they were like, all right, just let her free. No, but then they played Princeton in the first round. They beat them 7-0. They played Arnold Turner. They beat them 9-0. So I'm like, okay, another Carrollton school next up to get just blasted. And Creekview gave them a game. Yeah. And I was hearing from Kendrick, earlier this morning. Creekview's goalie was just phenomenal. And so I'm like thinking, okay, Creekview, they beat North in a shootout in the round before. And then they take Independence, who is a better team, plain and simple. They're state ranked, top 10 in the state. They're a phenomenal, explosive team. Maybe Creekview is just that team playing for the shootouts, what teams do in the playoffs. I wasn't at that game, so don't get mad at me, Creekview, if y'all see this. But, I mean, if you have a good goalie and the team is explosive offensively, why not stack the back and pray for shootouts? And that's what they did. And they almost knocked off Independence in what would have been probably the upset of the playoffs for sure, at least on the girls' side, in that region for sure.
I feel like at some point, though, that the shoe was going to drop and Independence wasn't going to just average 7 goals a game for the rest of the entire postseason. But yeah, at the very least, for their sake, it was good to at least have that matchup where it's not coming as routine as it had been in recent weeks. And they
needed that. Yeah. Because if they would have won 6, 7, 8-0, then they could be going into these games. They play Mount Pleasant at Standards at 12:30, and if they happen to get by them, most likely they'll be playing Highland Park.
Ooh, and you just saw Highland Park.
I've seen Highland Park twice last week, and that game will not be a blowout on either side.
They will not be scoring 7 goals in Highland Park.
No, and I guess that can kind of transition us into, the game I saw Highland Park play last.
Yeah.
Against Wakeland, the defending state champions, the Wakeland girls soccer team. And boys, so Highland Park was coming off a 6-3 win over Frisco Centennial. Wakeland coming in red hot. And this game was about as good as it could have been, as good as it had been the last 2 years. 3rd year in a row they've met in the playoffs. So part 3, rubber match, something had to give. Wakeland beat them in shootouts last year. Highland Park beat them 2-1 the year before. The winner each of those games went on to win state. So is this something? Is this Highland Park's chance now that they won and they're going to go on to win state again like they did in 2017? I don't know, but this game was 1-1. The entire second half. 1-1 going into the half. Coming out, Wakeland dominated, the last 20, 25 minutes. They had the win at their back. They just couldn't put them away. Gracie Bryan came close. She scored Wakeland's only goal of that game. Obviously, we've had her on the pod and talked about her plenty. Hannah Mandel, Peyton Adams, other seniors played their final game. It's really heartbreaking for that team, knowing that run they went on last year. A bulk of that team coming back. You get a coaching change. Sid Curry retires. You bring in Jamie Langford, who's won state titles with the McKinney teams. And they were locked and loaded. I wouldn't say they were the favorite because they're in that same region as Highland Park, but that would have been something really special, to beat the Lady Scots. But hey, there's no shame in losing to them.
Nope.
Highland Park has one of the best players in the state in Presley Eccles. She made play after play after play against Centennial. She made the big play at the end, scored the game-winning goal for Highland Park with 1:37 left in regulation. Just devastating for the Wakeland girls soccer team.
But obviously, all hope is not lost, though, for the Wakeland soccer scene in general. Boys are still kicking, but we'll get to them in a sec. Let's give Taylor
a break.
Let's give Taylor a chance to chime in. Taylor, you've been following this Lake Dallas team. As Lake Dallas is the good times just keep on rolling for the Falcons, who are just continuing to make history with each round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the story for the entire postseason is that and I asked Brandon Martin. Basically that question after their win over Arlington Heights last week on Friday is that every round is uncharted territory. Mm-hmm. It's like, how do you continue to prepare? What do you continue to do? Because, every round and every step you take is a new experience completely for literally everybody in the program. So, man, it's been a couple of thrillers. I mean, they beat Mansfield Legacy 3-0 in the area round, but you saw that by-district game where they had to come back twice in the final 15 seconds of a period. In the final 15 seconds of regulation, they get the penalty kick attempt from Carlos Zamora, scores on the rebound, go to overtime, and then Anthony Patty, the sophomore, scores to win that game.
With 2 seconds left.
With 2 seconds left. They roll through Mansfield Legacy and then get Arlington Heights, and kind of a similar story. I mean, it wasn't the last 15 seconds, but going into the half, they were down 1-0 to Arlington Heights. Zamora tied it in the second half at 1-1. Heights scored like 3 minutes later. Lake Dallas was down 2-1, and then, guess who? Anthony Patty with back-to-back goals within, I believe, 3 minutes to put Lake Dallas on top 3-2. And they would ride out that lead. Some tense moments to the end, definitely. I mean, at Arlington Heights, obviously in the postseason, especially, you're down a goal. It starts to get under 10 minutes. You're going to just throw everything you have, in the attacking third and see what happens. But Lake Dallas survives, headed to their first regional tournament. As I mentioned, every round is uncharted territory. So
I mean, they had won one playoff game before this season.
And it was last year, and that was it. And, it continues the theme of, they're eliminated by Lovejoy last season. And the Leopards tied it on an 80th minute goal and then beat Lake Dallas in overtime. And I know Brandon Martin said the same thing to you during that bi-district game when they came back. That moment and that goal is so etched in their memories that, and Patty said as much too when I asked him about, his game-winning goal last week, that they just keep playing. That's been their one mission and their one kind of mantra this season is that, we're going to play 80 minutes, we're going to play 100 minutes if we need to, we're going to play the shoot. Like, there's no reason to ever quit, and they haven't. And now they've earned a date with a regional tournament full of district winners, which it's funny looking at the Region 1 and Region 3 brackets, I guess. Lake Dallas gets Bel Air, Burleson, Wichita Falls host Wichita Falls somehow. That worked out for them. Lake Dallas plays them at 10 a.m. Friday in Wichita Falls. All district champions, and then on the other side, one district champion in Region 3, which is, it's kind of crazy just how things shake out. But so certainly no easy task in the regional tournament, but I mean, I'm not willing to put anything past Lake Dallas at this point. They just continue to find ways to win soccer games. They are a family, I think, in the truest sense of the word. They're like I mentioned, they definitely have kind of a never say die attitude, no matter what the score is. It was insane. Patty scoring those 2 goals back to back, but it's almost expected at this point. Like, they just keep doing it. They just keep finding ways to win. So it's going to be tough. You got to go out to Wichita Falls. Like I said, it's a home game for Wichita Falls on Friday, but man, I'm not ready to write them off in any game. So, already a pretty historic, magical season for them, completely uncharted waters, but no signs of slowing down, at least not for now.
Whereas this is all uncharted waters for Lake Dallas, this is just another day in the office for Frisco Wakeland, man. Frisco Wakeland boys still kicking around, still in line to defend their state championship. And sure enough, the run continues Friday, 5:30 p.m. out at Standard Stadium. They draw Jacksonville. Talk a bit about Wakeland, though, the Wolverines, kind of where they're at now as they are once again bound for the regional tournament.
What's it going to take to get the regional tournament at the Star? I mean, Wichita Falls gets one in their own backyard. Frisco's always in it. Let's get it.
The Kinney ISD Stadium stepped up to the plate and got the Region 1 6A in their backyard.
I mean, granted, they'll be right down the street in Carrollton, so no complaints there. One thing to note, so Wakeland, through these first 3 games, they've been blowing teams out. Last year, through the playoffs, when they went on that magical run after finishing 4th in district, they were just squeaking by, some teams. They barely beat Prosper, then they went to extra time and shootouts against Wiley East. They beat Centennial in that epic 3rd round game that I was at McKinney Boyd, and then they needed extra time to beat Lake Ridge at the regional tournament, which I was at last year at Stanridge, and then they barely beat Mount Pleasant, a team they could rematch against in the regional final once again, a team they beat 1-0 on a late goal. I believe it was by Jacob Miller. Jacob Miller, the same kid that said, that gave me the infamous quote last year about, we waited till the playoffs and this isn't word for word, but he said something along the lines, we waited till the playoffs to really turn it up, which, I mean, apparently they did.
Because they finished 4th last year in that district.
Yes, they were on the cusp of being Frisco Centennial this year, possibly the 2nd best team in that district, and they didn't make the playoffs, which blows my mind that Centennial didn't make it. But then you look at this year, and they're just blowing teams out so far. They have a 4-0 win against Jefferson. They start off the postseason with a 6-0 win over Sherman. I mean, that's the benefit, I guess, of being the district champion. Your first few games are a lot easier. Last year they had a tougher road to start it off. But Arnold Turner, who's been perennial playoff team in boys soccer year in and year out, they beat them 3-1 last week, and so couldn't tell you anything about Jacksonville. Don't know the scouting report on them yet. I'll talk to Coach Andy Holt later this week. But, you know, I don't see them losing until maybe a game against Mount Pleasant, a rematch, you know, or Heritage. I would love a Heritage.
Get some Frisco on Frisco.
There's so many Friscos. Man, that would be awesome. A Heritage Wakeland rematch from that district finale.
Yep.
They meet in the regional final. So many times this year in so many sports we've seen, you know, Frisco against Frisco in a regional championship. You know, obviously the Lone Star Liberty girls basketball was fun.
Absolutely.
I was hoping we'd get that Independence Wakeland girls soccer regional final, but we can hope for Heritage Wakeland here Saturday, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give the Wolverines just the edge, just because of their prior experience.
Yeah, of course. And some have been saying, you know, the buzz around Wakeland is that, you know, these teams are built for this year and next year, because the majority of their star players right now are juniors. You look at Todd Fuller, junior. He's been a starter on this team since he was a freshman. You look at Mark Barbonis, state tournament MVP last year as a sophomore. He's a junior, and he's playing really well. And you have some other pieces around these guys, and you know, these are the years that they were supposed to be really winning, not last year and the year before when they won state titles. So, 3-peat? We'll see.
Oh yeah, I'm sure those are just heartwarming words for the rest of Frisco ISD. Yeah, and that's a look at it's just a look at kind of where things stand right now in the high school soccer playoffs, be it 6A and 5A. We'll be covering all of this good stuff on Friday and potentially Saturday. So yeah, we'll have you covered there. Nevertheless, folks, yeah, that'll do it for this episode of the podcast. For Matt Welch, Taylor Ragland, Brian Murphy, appreciate Justin and Devin for tagging along as well. Folks, you enjoy your week, and we will talk to y'all later.